So the hero's journey, this sort of cyclic pattern, and for anyone who hasn't heard of this before, sorry, probably should have said this earlier
Yeah.
on, but um, uh, this guy Joseph Campbell, he studied world mythology, and he
Hmm.
sort of, as he read more and more myths, he sort of noticed that there was a certain pattern of events
Right.
that was in common to all of these stories,
Hmm.
with people sort of they're living their lives, and then they're sort of called to adventure.
Yeah.
Then they enter another world, and then they're sort of helped out by this person or that person, whatever, and then they sort of reach some sort of realization, and then they have to return to their original world, but
Hmm.
as sort of like a changed person.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, it's a pattern that once you sort of know what the pattern is, once you've read that,
Hmm.
then you sort of you read almost anything that people like, and
Yeah.
you can see that
See
pattern.
it. Yeah. It's
And
everywhere.
and that's one of the great things about the one of the things, I mean, Star Wars in the 70s when it came out
So
was like,
perfect.
it was like, yeah, it was like really cool, like cool special effects, but
Yeah. They
it's not the
nailed that.
only, yeah, it's not the only like cool space movie, and there are a lot of like silly things about it,
For sure. Oh yeah.
but at the same time, it's like, I think part of the reason people love it is because like George Lucas had sort of read this theory of myth building, and it's like very literal. Like each step is like in there in a very literal way,
Hmm.
and so it's sort of it really plays into this. And I guess the idea is that it reflects sort of how we all grow, like how we all sort of grow through life and all of the challenges that we have, but also sort of describes the way that we think about our own successes.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of just like a description of what we do psychologically
Right.
as we live. And so the having that, so certainly having that framework and sort of already knowing that, okay, there are these certain steps. If you want to write something that's going to resonate with people, it makes it
Ah.
easier to just already have that as a template, right?
Mhm.
I think that's a good way of thinking about the scientific method. And
Yeah.
when you learn about it, it's very abstract, right? And you're sort of, when you do like the, middle school, high school, like science fair project, it's like, you have to say, this is background research, hypothesis, test,
Yeah.
data analysis, conclusion, right?
Yeah.
But those really are sort of the steps. Like that's sort of the science version of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, that I think scientists like us or people we know will sort of say, that's not really how it works in real life. It's like, you like you do this experiment, but then you mess it up, and then you got to go do something differently, and then you sort of
Mhm.
notice something strange, and sort of in retrospect you're like, oh, I guess that's what I was really testing. And the way that you write up the story isn't always the way it happened in the
Yeah.
lab,
Yeah.
but at some level it is, right? At some
Mhm.
level you had some set of things that you knew.
Yeah.
You had a thought, a hypothesis that you wanted to test, or a question that you wanted to gather more data on.
Mhm.
So you set up an experiment, and even though it's messy, I mean, life is always messy, and the
Right.
hero journey, sometimes it's only in retrospect that you sort of see, oh, these are how I went through these steps as I
Yeah.
went
It's not
through this, like,
linear.
yeah, as I went through. Well, but in retrospect, if you go back and you say, oh, as I think about this process that I went through, like it's a lot harder to say I'm at this point in the process than it is to say a year later, oh, at that point I was at this point in the process.
Right.
And I think the same with science, where really the scientific method is, it's not just a I mean, one way to think about it, I think this is a good way to think about it, is as an effective technique for gaining new knowledge that is going to actually be legitimate and useful.
Yeah.
But the other way to think about it is just as a description of the process that anyone who's investigating the the universe is going to go through.
Mhm.
And sort of knowing those steps allows you to sort of execute that more effectively, just like George Lucas writing Star Wars, just following the steps of Joseph Campbell
Yeah.
is a lot easier than just trying to come up with a story and refine it over the years so that it resonates with people until you get to the point that
Right.
you sort of arrive there by accident.